3 warning relays went black as the storm turned toward the ranches. Graham had one way to reach 12 adults, the radio channel that once broke him. Static filled his headset, and the past began swallowing the room. Then Mercy pressed his leg as Flint barked and echo tracked the failing relay. If you believe God sends courage on 4 paws, stay with their story. The tornado had taken the roof from a machine shed, folded 2 grain bins into the north ditch, and planted a kitchen chair upside down in Blackwater Prairie. It had left the warning siren standing. The gray tower rose above the weather relay with its horn pointed east, untouched except for a strip of insulation caught around one support. It should have been crying across the fields. Instead, it stood silent while fence wire ticked against a post and water dripped through a crack in the station's concrete awning. Graham preferred silence when he chose it. After a storm, it felt like a radio operator holding his breath. He crossed the gravel lot, carrying a canvas tool bag. At 30, he still had the broad, muscular build the Navy had demanded. Rain darkened his swept-back brown hair, and short stubble sharpened his square jaw. He moved around broken glass, measuring damage in straight lines. Bent antenna mast, severed power cable, south camera gone, generator shed intact. Inventory made trouble smaller. He touched the control behind his right ear and lowered the gain on his hearing device. The prairie dimmed, wind became a soft pressure. The loose sheet metal on the generator shed stopped striking so hard inside his skull. Years earlier, several voices had crowded a military channel at once. One instruction vanished beneath another. Graham heard enough to answer, and not enough to be right. He no longer trusted noise merely because it came through official equipment. He unlocked the relay station and stepped inside. The front control room was almost painfully orderly. Manuals stood by date on a steel shelf. Spare fuses filled labeled bins. A coffee maker sat beside one clean mug. No pictures hung on the walls. The only personal object was an old field communications unit with a voice logging module, its volume knob blistered brown by heat. Behind a fire door stood a reinforced refuge room, rated for 12 adults. A short passage led to the 2-room caretaker apartment, included in Graham's maintenance lease, his legal residence, though he rarely called it home. The dogs were sheltering in the control room only until he could make the apartment safe for them. Graham set down his bag without looking at it. Backup power kept the console alive, but 3 county nodes flashed amber. The main siren circuit showed no return signal. He pulled a panel and tested 2 relays. Wires behaved according to rules. A broken connection didn't pretend it had called twice. He was tightening a terminal when tires ground across the gravel outside. Graham paused. The county road beyond the station was closed, and no repair crew had been scheduled until morning. He moved to the narrow window and saw a mud-streaked animal rescue van pulling into the lot. One rear door was tied shut with orange rope. A second vehicle, a white utility truck, waited by the gate. The van stopped. The driver's door opened, and Ruth Calder climbed down wearing rubber boots, a faded Navy rain shell, and the expression of a woman who had already solved an argument he hadn't begun. Graham opened the station door 6 inches. "Road's closed. So is my shelter." Ruth was 62, lean and straight-backed, with silver curls beneath a canvas cap. 20 years in Navy logistics had taught her to move supplies through bad conditions and impatient people. Now she ran Blackwater County Animal Response. "Lost the west half of our roof," she said. "I need dry floor until the temporary kennels arrive. This is a relay station. Excellent observation." The back of the van shifted. All 3 metal muzzles appeared at once through the widening gap in the rear doors. They came forward so quickly that Graham took 1 step back before he could stop himself. A sable face pushed low beneath the orange rope. A black muzzle appeared above it, still and watchful. Between them, a cream-white nose found the rain and trembled. Then the van rocked on its springs. Ruth looked over her shoulder. "That's Flint objecting to current accommodations." "You name them." Leah did. They were transferred from a closing rural kennel to a licensed rescue east of here. Tornado rolled the transport trailer on County 8. Drivers bruised, dogs are sound, paperwork looks like oatmeal. Dr. Leah Monroe stepped from the utility truck carrying towels and 3 slip leads. She was 39, compact and quick, with a dark braid through the back of a county emergency cap. "No fractures, no breathing trouble, no cuts that need closing," Leah said. "They're frightened, thirsty, and approximately 5 months old. I need 10 minutes indoors to examine them again." Graham looked at the station behind him. clean floor, open electrical cabinets, one exit. 5. Ruth smiled as if he had offered Christmas dinner. Flint reached the doorway first. More than 40 pounds, sable-coated and broad-pawed, he slipped the lead, skidded across the concrete, and stopped beneath the console with one ear upright and the other bent sideways. Then he barked at a yellow mop bucket. The sound struck Graham before the humor did. His shoulders tightened. He lowered his hearing device another step. "Hostile equipment secured," he said. Ruth covered a laugh with a cough. Echo entered next, neither cowering nor rushing. The black female's amber eyes traveled from the backup unit to the ventilation fan and then to Graham's hands. She turned toward a faint click inside the wall. Mercy came last, smaller and cream white beneath red Kansas mud. She touched Flint's shoulder, then Echo's cheek. Only when both were within reach did she drink. Graham noticed. He wished he hadn't. Leah examined paws, eyes, gums, and ribs, while Ruth spread towels near the far wall. Flint discovered his reflection in a dark monitor and tried to find the other puppy behind it. Echo listened to the fan. Mercy dragged 2 towels together and lay where she could see both littermates. "They stay in that corner," Graham said. "No free movement near the equipment, no food beside the consoles, no barking." Flint barked again at his reflection. "That last standard may require a negotiation," Leah said. "Then negotiate quickly." Ruth's handheld radio chirped. A dispatcher reported that temporary cages had arrived at the fairgrounds, but only 2 spaces remained on the next vehicle. Another rescue 40 miles south could take 1 dog immediately. "Fine," Graham said. "Move them." Ruth studied the 3 dogs. "Together would be better." Better isn't available. The words came easily because they were true. They also left a familiar taste behind. Leah clipped a blue lead to Flint and guided him toward the door. He resisted at first, paws sliding, then followed when she used a piece of kibble. Echo rose. Mercy rose faster. Graham held the steel door while rain swept beneath the awning. Flint crossed the threshold. Echo took 2 steps after him. Mercy shot between them. The small white shepherd turned sideways and dropped across the doorway. Forelegs stretched toward Flint, hindquarters pressed against Echo. Leah stopped before the leads tangled. Flint twisted back toward Mercy, whining high in his throat. Echo abandoned the exit, planted herself against Flint's shoulder, and stared at the van. No one had given a command. No one needed to invent one. Leah crouched without touching them. They're bonded, or close to it. Look at the immediate following, the contact seeking, the distress when distance opens. We can separate them if safety requires it, but repeated moves tonight will add stress. The county has 2 spaces, Graham said. 2 together, Ruth replied, 1 alone. Flint pulled once toward the lot, then back toward the others. Mercy remained across the threshold, shaking from effort rather than cold. Echo stood so close that their coats blended black, cream, and sable beneath the gray daylight. Graham's hand tightened around the door edge. He knew what happened when a team was divided by necessity. People used calm words: operational, temporary, best available option. Later, when the damage had names, everyone spoke as though the choice had belonged to the weather. Behind him, the relay console gave a soft electronic pulse. Amber, amber, amber. "How long?" he asked. Ruth didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Temporary kennels should be usable within 72 hours. This site isn't licensed for animals. Emergency sheltering gives us a short window. Leah will document intake. I'll bring crates, food, cleaning supplies, and barriers. I have exposed wiring. Then close the panels. The ventilation is barely adequate for people. Good thing they're not staying forever." Graham looked at her. Ruth met his eyes with the patient stillness of someone who had spent years waiting for stubborn officers to recognize their own orders. He released the door and stepped back. 72 hours, he said. Temporary storm inventory. You remain responsible for placement, medical care, and supplies. They stay out of the equipment bay. Flint bounded inside as if the ruling had been delivered in his favor. Echo followed with less celebration. Mercy waited until both had cleared the threshold, then rose and slipped in behind them. Ruth took a clipboard from the van. "Do you want their names on the intake form? They already have names." "That wasn't my question." Graham signed anyway. The next hour filled his station with bowls, crates, puppy food, cleaning supplies, bright towels, and a rubber rooster Flint treated as a strategic threat. Graham moved every item into position, Mercy moved one towel back. He returned it. She waited until he turned, then dragged it beside Echo. Graham left it there on the second attempt. By late afternoon, Leah had completed her notes and the utility truck was loaded. Ruth stood at the doorway holding 3 plain leads. The rain had weakened to a mist. Beyond the lot, the prairie lay bruised beneath a widening strip of pale sky. The East Rescue confirmed a foster for each one, Ruth said. Nobody has room for 3. If our temporary kennels don't reopen, those may become the only placements. You said 72 hours. I said that's our target. She placed the leads in his hand. Red for Flint, blue for Echo, green for Mercy. 3 loops settled across his palm, light as cord and heavier than they had any right to be. Clock starts when I drive away, Ruth said. Graham glanced down. That's not how clocks work. It's how responsibility works. She walked to the van before he could return the leads. The engine started. Flint put both paws against the wall beneath the window. Echo sat back, ears tracking tires over gravel. Mercy stood between them. The van passed the broken fence and became a white shape across the wet grass. When it disappeared, Flint came down from the wall. One by one, all 3 German shepherds turned toward Graham. Water tapped the awning. The generator hummed beneath the floor. 3 dogs breathed in different rhythms, waiting for the only person left to tell them what happened next. Graham looked at the colored leads in his hand. This is not a home, he said. Flint sat crookedly. Echo tilted her head. Mercy picked up the edge of his rain jacket and carried it to the towels. Graham closed the steel door against the ruined prairie and heard the latch settle behind him. At New 200, Graham Mercer discovered that 3 German Shepherd puppies could defeat a system designed by a former Navy SEAL in less than 6 minutes. He had divided the weather station into zones. The equipment bay was restricted. The washroom was secured. The open floor near the west wall contained 3 folded crates, 3 water bowls, 2 washable pads, and a row of towels that Graham had aligned with the concrete seam. Flint moved the first towel before Graham finished explaining the arrangement. No. The sable puppy froze with the cloth between his teeth. His upright ear pointed toward Graham. The other leaned sideways, giving him the appearance of a soldier whose helmet had slipped during inspection. Drop! Flint ran. He made one full circuit of the console, clipped the yellow mop bucket, and barked when it rolled after him. Echo rose from beside the ventilation fan to follow the bucket with her eyes. Mercy ignored the pursuit, took Graham's rain jacket from the chair, and dragged it toward the towel nest with slow determination. Graham caught Flint near the generator panel, traded the towel for a piece of kibble, and returned both to their assigned places. Behind him, Mercy added the rain jacket to her bedding. He retrieved it. She waited until he turned away. By ZO215, the jacket had changed hands 4 times. At U220, Graham surrendered it under the revised designation of expendable insulation. The schedule went onto a clipboard. O200, water and relief break. U230, rest. U530, feeding. UVV45, controlled outdoor movement. U600, rest. He wrote in block letters and clipped the page beside the crates. The dogs watched from the towels. Flint panted. Echo listened to the pen scratch. Mercy slept with one pale paw over the cuff of his jacket. This is a temporary duty station, Graham told them. Predictability prevents mistakes. Flint sneezed. Graham lowered the gain on the small hearing device behind his right ear. The backup generator softened to a distant thrum. Rain against the awning became less pointed. He had learned to live inside a narrow range between too little sound and too much, adjusting the world one click at a time. The 3 dogs had no respect for range. At W242, Flint barked at the mop again. Echo found a loose tag on one crate and made it tap softly against the wire. Mercy dreamed, paws twitching against the floor. Graham drank coffee that had gone cold and revised the schedule twice. By sunrise, none of them had slept. The prairie emerged beneath a pale sky, every mile showing something displaced. A cattle panel leaned against a cottonwood. Pink insulation clung to barbed wire. Utility crews moved along the county road in yellow trucks, raising small islands of power, one line at a time. Graham took the dogs outside on their colored leads. He held red, blue, and green in one hand, then immediately separated them when Flint lunged toward a tumbleweed. Echo stopped to inspect a bent road marker. Mercy walked 3 steps, realized the others had moved in opposite directions, and sat down. Formation, Graham said. The leads braided around his boots. It took 11 minutes to travel 40 yards. Flint attempted to investigate every piece of storm debris. Echo paused whenever a truck changed gears on the road. Mercy kept moving from one littermate to the other, making sure the distance between them never widened beyond the length of her lead. Back inside, all three fell asleep before breakfast. Graham stared at the clipboard. Under 0545, he wrote, "Operational delay." Ruth Calder returned shortly after 8 with 6 bags of puppy food, 3 plastic gates, cleaning solution, and the kind of cheerful energy Graham considered suspicious before coffee. A battered county sedan followed her into the lot. "Kennels aren't ready," she said as they unloaded. "Fairgrounds lost part of the water line. We can keep emergency status through the weekend, but not forever." "Your original estimate was 72 hours. An estimate isn't a promise. People use those words interchangeably when they want cooperation. Ruth set down a bag of food. And some people call 3 puppies storm inventory when they don't want to admit they spent the night keeping them comfortable. I maintain containment. Mercy walked past with his rain jacket. Ruth watched her. Clearly, the man from the county sedan closed his door with care rather than force. Daniel Pike was 46, narrow-shouldered and neatly dressed in work pants, waterproof boots, and a tan field coat bearing the Blackwater County seal. Wind had thinned his brown hair at the temples. He carried a metal clipboard and looked tired enough to have been awake as long as Graham. "I'm not here to remove them," Daniel said before introductions were complete. "Good opening," Graham replied. "Usually means removal appears later." Daniel accepted that without offense. "I manage animal control compliance. Ruth requested an emergency site review. If the fairground kennels stay closed, we need to know what this building can safely support." He worked through the station without drama. He measured the floor, checked the ventilation register, examined the steel entrance, and tested the rear service door. The rear latch moved 2 inches and stuck. "Storm shifted the frame," Graham said. "I'll correct it." Daniel wrote it down. "There also isn't a contained outdoor area. They have leads. Leads require a handler. A compliant foster site needs secure relief space. This isn't a foster site." Daniel glanced at the 3 dogs asleep against one another. "That's what we're determining." He pointed out the exposed conduit near the backup unit, the limited airflow, and the cleaning sink that shared space with electrical storage. None of it was personal. That made the list harder to dismiss. Graham could argue with a judgment. Measurements simply remained measurements. While Daniel inspected the rear door, Ruth helped raise the plastic gates around the west wall. Flint considered the first gate a challenge, put both paws on it, and tipped it into a bowl. The clang snapped through the room. Graham's hand went to his hearing control. 1 click down. Echo's head turned with his. The black puppy left the towels and moved toward the lowest shelf beneath the workbench. She paused beside the old field communications unit, ears angled forward. The military radio included an internal voice logging module, and Graham had kept it there for nearly 3 years without powering it. Its casing was scratched, one corner dented, and the volume knob had blistered during the operation that ended his service. "Leave it," he said. Echo didn't touch the radio. She listened. A faint pulse came through the speaker, then silence. Graham crossed the room. The unit wasn't connected to the station network, and its battery should have been empty. An external adapter still rested in a loose power strip beneath the bench. He reached past Echo to check it, and her shoulder brushed the switch. The strip rocked. A green indicator flashed. In the quiet room, a woman's voice came out of the radio. "Graham, it's Aaron. I know you can see I've called." The years between then and now vanished in 7 words. Ruth stopped with one hand on the gate. Daniel turned from the rear door. Even Flint held still. After their mother passed away, Graham had copied Aaron's voicemail from his phone into the unit's voice logger because deleting it had felt too final. He had never played it beyond the opening. The recording carried a thin, compressed sound. Aaron's voice was younger, but the effort to keep it level was the same. Behind her came the faint roll of hospital wheels and a distant announcement Graham couldn't make out. "Mom had a better morning. She asked whether you'd fixed that old station yet. I told her." Graham seized the burned volume knob. Static cracked beneath his fingers. The knob resisted, then turned. Aaron's voice dropped to a whisper and disappeared before the message reached its final line. Nothing moved. Echo sat beside his boot, looking not at him, but at the speaker. Graham pulled the power strip from the wall. "Obsolete equipment," he said. Should have been disconnected. Ruth's face had changed, the humor gone without being replaced by pity. Graham, you need to finish the inspection. Daniel looked down at his clipboard. Rear exit first. It was a kindness offered in procedural language. Graham recognized it and resented needing it. Flint eventually nosed the fallen gate. Mercy brought the rain jacket back to the towels. The station resumed its ordinary noises, but Graham kept his hearing device turned low enough that every voice reached him through distance. Near noon, another vehicle entered the lot. This one was an ambulance supervisor's SUV with blue medical markings along the side. Erin Mercer stepped out carrying a weatherproof binder. She was 27, 3 years younger than Graham, with their mother's brown eyes and none of Graham's talent for hiding what they noticed. Her dark hair was tied at the nape of her neck. A navy paramedic jacket sat square across her shoulders, and a radio microphone rested near her collar. She stopped when she saw him in the doorway. "County has this listed as a backup shelter point," she said. "County lists a lot of things incorrectly. Then I need to document that." No greeting, no accusation. The absence of both crowded the space between them. Erin entered, saw Ruth and Daniel, then noticed the puppies behind the plastic gates. Flint approached first. Echo remained beside the workbench. Mercy stood between them, watching Erin's hands. "Since when do you have dogs?" Erin asked. "I don't." Mercy was lying on his rain jacket. Erin looked at the old field communications unit on the shelf. The power strip lay unplugged beside it. Her gaze settled on the burned knob, and something tightened around her mouth. "It still has the message." Graham faced Daniel. "What's the compliance timeline?" Erin waited 1 second longer, then opened her binder and began checking the shelter map as though the question had never been hers. Daniel gathered them beside the workbench. He explained that emergency authority could cover the weekend and perhaps several additional days. A 30-day provisional foster period was possible if Graham submitted an application and corrected the safety problems. After that, the station either passed inspection or the dogs moved. "Together?" Graham asked. Ruth shook her head. "No placement has opened for all three." Daniel removed 3 folders from his case. Each held a photograph, medical notes, and the contact information of a separate licensed foster. He placed them on the workbench beside the 3 food bowls. "These aren't orders," he said. "They're contingency placements. My job is to keep the dogs safe, including if this site can't." He spoke without threat. Graham almost wished he hadn't. After the others left, the station grew quiet again. Erin's SUV was the last to turn onto the county road. She did not wave. Graham stood at the window until dust settled behind her. On the workbench, Flint's folder rested beside the red bowl. Echo's lay beside the blue, Mercy's beside the green. 3 dogs, 3 photographs, 3 addresses. Graham read every page without sitting down. Then he gathered the folders, opened the drawer beneath the dead radio, and placed all 3 inside together. By the 6th morning, Graham had abandoned the clipboard. The schedule still existed, but it now hung beneath 3 muddy paw prints and a tooth mark along one corner. Feeding happened within 15 minutes of 05:30. Outdoor movement happened when nobody was chewing electrical insulation. Rest happened whenever Flint stopped treating sleep as a personal weakness. Graham called the changes field adjustments. He did not call them attachment. The provisional foster application lay on the workbench beside Daniel Pike's inspection list. Graham had completed his name, address, and emergency contact. The line asking how long he intended to house the animals remained blank. 30 days was the county limit. 72 hours had already become 6. He folded the paper beneath a manual and took the dogs outside. Morning sunlight spread across Blackwater Prairie, showing every scar the tornado had left. Utility poles stood again along the road, but the fields remained littered with boards, sheet metal, and insulation caught in the grass. Graham had used temporary fence panels from Ruth to build a small relief enclosure beside the station. It wasn't compliant yet. The posts needed concrete, the gate needed a second latch, and Flint had already identified 3 places that deserved immediate excavation. "Flint!" The sable puppy stopped digging and looked up, nose powdered with Kansas soil. Graham raised 2 fingers. "Come!" Flint came at speed, overshot by 4 feet, circled, and returned from the wrong direction. Graham gave him a piece of kibble anyway. Movement made sense to Flint. Come meant run. Heel meant run beside the person. Down meant reach the ground quickly enough to receive food. Stay offended him. The instant Graham stepped away, Flint followed with the wounded expression of a dog, convinced abandonment had become part of the lesson. Echo learned differently. Graham discovered that the black female watched his shoulders before his hands. If he shifted his weight toward the gate, she was already moving. If he straightened before giving the release word, her body prepared to rise. He began making his gestures smaller, testing how little movement she needed. Mercy watched both of them. She would sit when Flint sat and lie down when Echo did. But if either dog moved too far away, she broke position to check. Graham stopped correcting that every time. Leah had told him repetition could build confidence, but forcing prolonged separation this early would turn training into another source of stress. Again, Graham said. All three faced him. He held up a flat palm. Wait. Flint's rear paws trembled. Echo held still. Mercy looked left, then right. Graham took one step backward. Flint launched forward. Outstanding discipline. The puppy arrived with such enthusiasm that his chest struck Graham's knees. Graham caught him by the shoulders, steadying both of them. Flint licked his wrist. For 1 second, a laugh rose unexpectedly in Graham's throat. It made no sound, but it loosened something behind his ribs. He set Flint down. Again. Dr. Leah Monroe arrived near noon for a follow-up examination. She checked their weight, paws, eyes, and hydration, then watched 10 minutes of training from a folding chair outside the enclosure. They're learning, Graham said. They are. Echo anticipates hand signals. Flint has reliable recall at 20 feet, unless there's moving vegetation. Mercy responds after visual confirmation from the others. Leah smiled. They're 5-month-old house dogs, Graham. I'm aware. You just delivered a readiness report. Flint attacked a clump of dry grass. Readiness remains limited. Leah crouched when Mercy approached and allowed the puppy to sniff her before touching her chest. Basic obedience is useful. Predictability will help all three. But none of this makes them working dogs. They aren't trained to recognize medical episodes, perform search and rescue, or make decisions for people. I haven't asked them to. Good. Keep not asking. The warning carried no accusation. Graham understood why she gave it. People saw alert ears and a dark muzzle, and imagined a finished German shepherd where a young, uncertain animal still lived. Leah helped him plan short sound sessions. Storm debris had introduced enough unpredictable noise. Controlled exposure needed to begin quietly and stop before fear took over. Graham found recordings of traffic, thunder, metal gates, and distant sirens. He played each at the lowest audible level while the dogs ate or worked simple cues. Flint ignored thunder, but challenged a recording of a delivery truck backing up. Echo searched for every speaker. Mercy startled at the first siren tone, then recovered when the sound remained soft and the others continued eating. Graham kept his own hearing device 1 step below its normal setting. The training wasn't only for them. Each day he raised the volume by 1 mark. He stood near the console with both boots flat on the floor and named what was real. Concrete beneath him, sunlight through the east window, backup generator at 60 hertz, 3 dogs eating from metal bowls. When the pressure inside his skull increased, he lowered the sound before his breathing changed. Control mattered. Choosing the sound mattered more. On the 9th day, a county technician called to schedule a local circuit test. Graham had replaced 2 damaged relays and restored the tower's return line. The exterior horn was inhibited at the controller, but had not been physically disconnected. The test should have sent a low internal tone through the station monitor for 5 seconds. Graham secured the dogs behind the plastic gates. He checked the monitor volume twice. Blackwater relay, ready for local test. The technician answered through the console. Copy, sending in 3. Graham placed his hand beside the cutoff switch. 3, 2, 1. The interior speaker gave a soft rising tone. Then the exterior siren came alive. Sound struck the station walls and returned from every surface. The tower horn poured a full warning note across the prairie. Too close, too loud, its pitch climbing through concrete and bone. Graham killed the monitor. The sound continued. His right hand missed the cutoff switch. The station disappeared beneath another room, another channel, another set of voices trying to occupy the same second. A command broke apart under static. Someone repeated coordinates. Someone else said, hold, or go, or no. Graham tore the hearing devices from behind his ears. The siren was still inside his head. His shoulder hit the equipment cabinet. Air entered his chest, but stopped high. each breath shorter than the one before it. He knew the pattern. Knowing did not end it. Flint barked toward the ceiling speaker, frantic and sharp. Echo ran along the plastic gate, stopping wherever the sound reflected strongest. They weren't responding to Graham's past. They were young dogs reacting to a painful, unfamiliar noise. He reached again for the cutoff. Then he felt weight against his right leg, warm, solid, shaking. Mercy had pushed through the loose end of the plastic barrier and pressed her shoulder along his shin. She wasn't calm. Her ears lay back, and her body trembled with every sweep of the siren. She had moved toward contact, because contact was what she sought when the group scattered. Graham put one hand into the thick cream fur at her shoulder. Not a rescue, an anchor he could choose to use. He fixed his eyes on the 4 bolts securing the cabinet to the wall, counted them, felt the floor through his boots, drew air through his nose for 4 counts, and released it for 6. The same sequence a Navy clinician had taught him, and he had spent years pretending he no longer needed. 4 bolts, concrete floor, warm fur. The cutoff switch stood 6 inches from his left hand. He pressed it. The tower fell silent. Flint barked once more, then stopped. Echo stood beneath the console with her head high. Mercy remained against Graham's leg until he loosened his grip. For several minutes, he sat on the floor. No one saw him except 3 dogs who lacked the language to turn weakness into judgment. The county technician's voice crackled from the handheld radio. Graham replaced one hearing device but kept the gain low. Blackwater, confirm status. He swallowed. Local output relay engaged with the monitor circuit. Exterior horn activated in error. You all right? Graham looked at Mercy. Correcting the fault. It wasn't an answer, but it was more than silence. He checked the control rack. A storm-shifted wire had crossed the low-voltage test return with the output relay. He isolated it, tagged the circuit, and documented the failed test. The work steadied his hands. Flint settled only after Graham moved his crate away from the ceiling speaker. Mercy returned to the towels, taking Graham's rain jacket with her. Echo did not settle. The black puppy stood beside the tall gray relay cabinet near the north wall. Her ears angled forward, then changed independently, one following the generator while the other held on the cabinet. She moved her nose along the closed door but did not scratch. Echo. She looked at Graham, then back at the cabinet. He listened. Without his right hearing device, he heard only the generator and Flint chewing the rubber rooster. The cabinet's indicator lights showed normal standby. Echo tilted her head. Graham approached and laid the back of his fingers near the metal. A faint vibration traveled through it, too fine to belong to the cooling fan. He shut down the secondary feed before opening the door. At first, nothing looked wrong. Rows of terminals sat in order. 2 replacement relays showed clean connections. Then a thin blue spark snapped beneath the upper bus bar. Echo stepped back. Graham aimed his flashlight behind the assembly. Tornado vibration had loosened a mounting screw. Under low load, the contact held. When the siren drew full power, heat had begun building around the gap. The spark flashed again, brighter. Graham cut the main breaker. The backup console went dark. Flint stopped chewing. For the first time since the storm, no amber nodes glowed across the room. Only the battery weather tablet remained alive on the workbench. Its screen refreshed as Graham reached for it. A line of storms was organizing over western Kansas, red cells gathering behind a yellow front. Beneath the map, the outlook had changed from marginal to enhanced. 3 dogs watched him from the dim station. Graham looked from the dead relay cabinet to the growing system on the screen. The siren could not be trusted under load, and the prairie had already learned what silence cost. Graham spent the 10th day making a list of everything he could not repair with what he had. After locking out the horn output, he restored only the protected, battery-backed control bus so the weather network could still report status. The list began with the upper bus assembly. The loose mounting screw had allowed heat to damage a neighboring module, and the replacement was 3 counties away. The rear service door needed a hydraulic spreader to square the frame. The relief enclosure needed concrete, another 40 feet of fencing, and a second latch Daniel Pike could not open by accident or Flint could open on purpose. Graham wrote prices beside each item. Then he crossed out labor. He could do the electrical work. He could set posts. He could rebuild the doorframe if he borrowed the right tools. The county had given him 30 days, which was generous by his old understanding of a deadline. In the Navy, 30 days had been enough to learn a coastline, build a communications plan, and become familiar with the sleeping habits of men who might never know his name. Here, 30 days meant asking people for equipment they would insist on bringing themselves. He ordered the relay module with his own credit card. Outside, Flint dug beside the unfinished fence post, while Echo watched a utility crew on the county road. Mercy lay on Graham's rain jacket in the open station doorway, shifting her gaze between her littermates and him. "You're all expensive," Graham said. Flint emerged with a length of old sprinkler hose and presented it as evidence of industry. That wasn't authorization. A blue medical SUV turned into the lot. Erin stepped out with the same weatherproof binder she had carried 2 days earlier, this time thick with maps. She paused at the enclosure. Flint hurried toward her, remembered the limit of the temporary fence only when the panel rattled, and sat because sitting had recently become his solution to uncertainty. Erin looked at Graham. "You trained him." "I taught him one alternative to collision." Echo approached more slowly. Mercy left the doorway long enough to touch noses with both dogs, then returned to the jacket. Erin opened the binder on the hood of her SUV. "I need 10 minutes. "For what?" "County emergency mapping. I told you the station isn't ready, and I told you it's listed." She unfolded a laminated map of Blackwater County. Red circles marked fire stations and municipal shelters. Blue squares identified backup warning and refuge points along isolated roads. One blue square sat over the weather relay. Beside it was Graham's signature. The letters were unmistakable. Compact capitals, no flourish. The final R cut short. The date was 18 months earlier, 5 weeks before their mother entered hospice. Graham studied it without touching the page. "I didn't authorize a public shelter. You authorized a backup refuge point for adults caught outside the main warning radius. 12-person capacity, radio relay, reinforced walls, emergency water. There is no emergency water. There was supposed to be." The memory returned in fragments. Aaron at his workbench with a county form. Their mother on the telephone asking whether the old station could help the ranches east of town. Graham saying he would look at the requirements after he replaced the antenna feed. He had signed because signing ended the conversation. Then the calls from the hospital began. "You filed this without confirming the upgrades," he said. Aaron's chin lifted. "You signed it. You knew the work wasn't done. I knew you said you'd do it." The dogs tracked the change in their voices. Flint rose. Echo looked between them. Mercy left the jacket and stood beside the enclosure gate. Erin noticed and lowered her tone. "I should have checked before the map went into the annual plan. I didn't. That's mine." Graham had prepared for denial, not admission. She closed one hand over the edge of the binder. "But people east of town still have a dead zone. The tornado crossed County 8 before the nearest siren reached them. I am not asking you to fix this because Mom wanted it. I'm asking because the next storm won't care why we stopped speaking. The relay cabinet is damaged. Then tell the county what you need. I know what I need. That's not the same as letting anyone provide it." He folded the map along its existing crease and handed it back. 10 minutes are over." Erin accepted the map. She did not mention the voicemail or the old radio. That restraint followed Graham long after her SUV left. At noon, 3 pickups and Ruth Calder's rescue van entered the lot. Graham stepped outside before anyone unloaded. Ruth climbed down in work gloves. "Before you say no, Daniel sent the site deficiencies to emergency management. These people volunteered." The first was Louise Ortega, a retired Navy electrician of 63 with a white mustache, a careful limp, and a canvas roll of tools that looked older than Graham. The second was Tessa Ward, a broad-shouldered rancher in her 50s whose south pasture bordered the county warning gap. 2 other farmers brought a post auger, fencing rolls, concrete, and a hydraulic spreader. "We can square the door in an hour," Louise said. "Post before sunset," Tessa added. Graham looked at the materials. They had brought the correct gauge fencing. The concrete was fast-setting. Louise's meter could test the bus without loading it. Useful things, offered without negotiation. "This is county property under a maintenance lease," Graham said. Ruth removed one glove. "Yes. Volunteer modifications create liability." Daniel approved the work list. I didn't. Tessa studied him, with gray eyes narrowed against the wind. "You don't want the fence?" "I don't want undocumented labor on a controlled site." Luis glanced at the 3 puppies. Flint had pressed his nose through the panel to inspect the tool roll. "Documentation can be written." Graham heard the trap inside every reasonable answer. If they repaired the station would belong partly to their effort. They would return. They would ask questions. They would expect the door to open because they had once helped secure it. "Not today," he said. Ruth's face went still. "The inspection is this afternoon. Then I'll fail it on accurate conditions." No one argued. That was worse. The post auger went back into a truck. Tessa secured the concrete. Luis rolled his tools without looking at Graham again. Within 10 minutes, the vehicles were moving down the road, leaving the station exactly as Graham had protected it, unchanged and his alone. Daniel arrived at 3. He wore the same tan field coat and carried a new inspection form. He tested the enclosure gate first. It shifted when he pulled upward. "Second latch missing," he said. "Ordered." Daniel pressed one boot against a fence post. The loose soil moved around it. No concrete. Scheduled. They went inside. Graham had covered the exposed conduit and moved cleaning supplies away from electrical storage. Daniel marked both items corrected. The ventilation reading remained below the county minimum for 3 growing dogs. At the rear exit, Graham pulled the latch and drove his shoulder into the door. It opened 4 inches, then jammed. Daniel wrote without expression. "Module delivery is tomorrow," Graham said. "I can restore the cabinet and address the door afterward." The electrical system isn't part of animal site approval. It is part of the building. So are the animals. You don't get to finish one category by ignoring another. Graham turned. "I am not ignoring them." Flint was asleep beneath the workbench. Echo lay with her chin over his back. Mercy occupied the gap between them, one paw resting on Graham's rain jacket. Daniel's eyes moved to the dogs and back. "I didn't say you were." The distinction landed harder than an accusation. Erin returned before the inspection ended, carrying updated weather data. She spread a printed outlook on the console while Daniel reviewed his findings. "The dry line accelerated," she said. "Storms may initiate west of us within 48 hours. The cabinet will be operational tomorrow. Will it carry full load?" "After testing. The last test triggered the exterior horn. I corrected that wire and found another fault." Graham set both hands on the console. "Do you have a question?" Erin held his gaze. "How many failures do you intend to manage alone before this becomes everybody else's emergency?" The hot smell reached them before the warning light did. Ozone, heated metal, the sharp, bitter scent of insulation beginning to soften. Conversation stopped. Echo was already on her feet, facing the gray cabinet. Graham crossed the room, felt warmth above the door seam, and cut the battery isolator. The module he had disconnected should have held no load, but heat from the damaged bus had spread into an adjacent terminal block. A small yellow indicator shifted to red. "Outside," Graham said. Daniel opened the main entrance. Erin clipped the leads while Graham checked the thermal strip on the cabinet. No smoke, no open flame. Just residual heat in a system that had found another path to fail. They moved the dogs into the enclosure. Mercy paced when Graham stayed inside, then settled when he stepped out with the tool bag. Daniel completed the inspection against the hood of his sedan. "The site doesn't pass," he said. "You corrected 2 items. 4 remain, and now the building has an unresolved electrical hazard. I know what the form says. Then hear what I'm saying. This is the first inspection, not the last. Correct the deficiencies and call me." He handed Graham the paper. No satisfaction. No threat. Only another deadline. Erin pointed toward the west. High clouds had begun spreading across the afternoon sky in thin white bands. "Forecast center may upgrade tomorrow," she said. "The track can still shift. It can always shift. That's why people build more than one warning point." She packed the map into her binder and left with Daniel. Graham remained in the enclosure after the vehicles disappeared. Flint fell asleep beside one of the 3 contingency folders Graham had carried outside during the electrical warning. Echo curled along his back. Mercy turned twice, then lay between the other 2 folders with her chin across their corners. Separate photographs, separate addresses, one pale paw holding the paper together. Beyond the fence, the volunteer trucks were no longer visible. Graham walked to the road and looked east, but the prairie gave him miles of emptiness. He opened his mouth to call them back. Wind moved through the damaged grass. No engines answered. Inside the station, the battery weather tablet issued a single alert. Graham returned and lifted it from the workbench. A tornado watch had been issued west of Blackwater County. On the battery weather tablet, the siren status tile changed from yellow to red. Graham called Ruth before sunrise. She answered on the second ring. Called her. He had prepared a complete request: hydraulic spreader, post auger, licensed electrical review, ventilation fan, 4 adults for labor. What came out was smaller. Bring them back. Ruth was quiet for half a breath. 8 o'clock. She did not make him explain. The replacement relay module arrived at 7. By the time Daniel Pike returned for the provisional site review, Graham and Luis Ortega had installed it, torqued every bus connection, and run a low-load test. The console was alive again. 3 county nodes glowed green. The exterior siren remained isolated until Luis could verify the repaired assembly under full demand. Outside, Tessa Ward and 2 farmers set fence posts while fast-setting concrete turned in a portable mixer. Aaron checked the emergency water inventory and found 12 sealed gallons where Graham had stacked them before dawn. Work filled the station grounds with engines, tools, and voices. Graham kept both hearing devices at controlled gain. Each time noise sharpened behind his eyes, he named the source instead of lowering everything into silence. Mixer, post driver, Luis's socket wrench, Flint objecting to a wheelbarrow. The sable puppy barked from inside the temporary enclosure until Graham gave him a sit cue. Echo watched the new ventilation fan turn slowly in its box. Mercy lay on the rain jacket, touching one littermate with each front paw. Daniel convened the review at 10. Ruth represented animal response. Aaron represented county medical readiness. Tessa stood for the ranches inside the warning gap. Luis attended as the licensed volunteer, inspecting the electrical repairs. There was no formal council table, so they gathered around Graham's workbench beside 3 food bowls and 1 dead field radio. Daniel checked his form. Electrical hazard? Luis lifted his meter. Replacement module installed. Damaged terminal block removed. Full load verification pending. Rear exit? Frame is close, Tessa said. Needs the spreader once more. Relief enclosure? Concrete isn't cured, Graham answered. Second latch goes on afterward. Ventilation? Mounted, not wired. Daniel marked each item. Then the site does not pass yet. Nobody argued. The statement belonged to the condition of the building, not the worth of the people repairing it. Erin's radio sounded. Her posture changed before the dispatcher finished speaking. She crossed to the battery weather tablet and opened the radar. A broken line of storms had organized west of Blackwater County, moving faster than the morning model. Forecast center says the southern cell turned right, she said. Possible rotation. Graham looked toward Tessa. Your ranch? 7 miles east. Who is there? My foreman and 2 hired hands, all adults. Aaron selected the county warning network. Yellow spread across the radar map, deepened to orange, then turned red around a tight hook on the southwest edge. 1 relay point went black, then a second, then a third. 3 dark squares appeared across the eastern prairie where green connections had been seconds before. The room seemed to lose light with them. Aaron keyed her radio. Dispatch Mercer, confirm loss of Archer Road, Ward South, and Mill Creek. Static answered first. Then, confirmed, automated call tree is delayed. Main tower has coverage, but terrain shadow remains east of County 8. The warning gap. Graham had signed his name beneath it 18 months ago. Daniel closed the inspection folder. Review suspended. Move everyone to the municipal shelter, Graham said. Aaron shook her head. Not enough time for the eastern ranches. We need this relay. Automatic routing is unstable. Can you run it manually? Graham looked at the console. The old county VHF network had been built in layers. Modern digital nodes sitting over analog repeaters. Private ranch frequencies bridged through a routing panel nobody had documented properly. He knew the paths because he had spent 2 winters tracing them when no one else cared. Yes. Then do it. The words were direct, not cruel. Still, his hands remembered another console and another set of voices. Aaron saw him stop. I can take the radio? You don't know the legacy routes? Then tell me. There wasn't time to translate years of wiring into instructions. Graham pulled the headset from its hook. He adjusted both hearing devices, then placed the padded cups over them. The channel opened inside his skull. Dispatch, weather center, 2 volunteer spotters, Tessa calling her foreman, a sheriff's deputy asking for road status. Voices overlapped beneath a wash of static. For 1 second, Graham heard none of the words. Only the old pattern. Mercy pressed against his calf. He did not look down. He knew the contact now. Warm shoulder, quick breathing. No special understanding behind it. A dog seeking the nearest member of her group while the room grew loud. Graham placed both boots flat on the floor. All stations, clear the channel. His voice came out level. Blackwater relay, assuming manual routing. Emergency traffic only. The voices stopped. Silence, chosen rather than escaped. He pointed to Erin. List every occupied site, she wrote quickly. Tessa supplied names and head counts. Graham set Archer Road to Analog Repeater 3, Ward South to the Agricultural Ban Bridge, and Mill Creek to direct Simplex through a volunteer truck on high ground. Ward South, this is Blackwater Relay. Confirm 3 adults moving to reinforced shelter. Tessa's foreman answered through static. 3 moving now. Call when secured. The rear service door banged open behind him. Flint barked hard from the enclosure, reacting to 2 ranchers arriving from the road. Graham turned enough to see Ruth redirect the adults toward the reinforced inner room. Flint stopped after a second cue, still alert but contained. Mill Creek, confirm receipt. No answer. Echo rose beside the console, ears angling toward a relay chatter that had changed pitch. She moved to the right side of the cabinet and stared upward. Graham checked the panel himself. The bridge indicator flickered. The new module held, but 1 analog repeater had dropped under load. Luis, repeater 3. Luis read the meter. Voltage stable, signal path isn't. Graham shifted Mill Creek onto the backup frequency. Volunteer Unit 6, climb north rise and relay to Mill Creek. Unit 6 moving. Rain began against the station, large drops striking the roof far apart. The radar hook passed south of the relay, but continued toward the warning gap. Archer Road reported 4 adults secured. Ward South reported 3. Unit 6 reached the rise and contacted Mill Creek. 2 adults moved into a below-grade shelter, while Graham kept the channel clear. 1 site remained, the Harlan Machine Shop, where 3 mechanics had stayed to cover storm-damaged windows. Harlan Shop, Blackwater Relay. Static. Harlan Shop, respond. Flint barked again as another pickup arrived. Echo tracked the unstable repeater. Mercy remained against Graham's leg. None of the dogs knew a machine shop existed. None knew the shape on the radar. Graham changed frequencies. Harlan Shop, this is Blackwater Relay on direct emergency channel. A man's voice broke through. We hear you. Move to the concrete service pit. Confirm 3 adults. 3, moving. Graham waited through 12 seconds of static. All 3 secured. Erin drew 1 line through the final name. The storm crossed the eastern ranches with hard rain and damaging wind, but without a tornado reaching the ground. The red hook weakened as it moved northeast. Dispatch restored the automated call tree 1 node at a time. Graham removed the headset. His hands were shaking. He rested them flat on the console until they stopped. Nobody praised him. Erin handed him water. Luis returned to his meter. Ruth checked the dogs. The ordinary response felt cleaner than applause. During the weather lull, the volunteers finished what they had begun. The spreader squared the rear door. Tessa installed the second gate latch while the farmers braced the fence. Luis wired the ventilation fan and used a portable load bank to complete a full-load electrical test, while the exterior horn remained physically disconnected. Daniel inspected each correction under darkening afternoon clouds. He measured airflow, tested the exit, pulled at the gate, and photographed the cured post bases. Graham went inside while the others worked. The field communications unit remained beneath the bench. He connected the power strip and turned the burned volume knob. Erin stood in the doorway but did not come closer. Her younger voice returned. Mom had a better morning. She asked whether you'd fixed that old station yet. I told her you were trying. Graham closed his eyes. The message continued past the place where he had always stopped it. I'm not calling because I think you can fix this. Mom doesn't expect you to. I just need my brother to answer me. Please, Graham, just answer. The recording ended. He stood with 1 hand on the bench. I heard the hospital and thought you were asking me to come make something better. Erin's voice was quiet. I was asking you to be there while it wasn't. I should have answered, yes. No instant forgiveness followed. She crossed the room and unplugged the radio, not to silence it, but because the message was finished. At sunset, Daniel reopened the review. Graham stood before the workbench with Ruth, Erin, Tessa, and Luis beside him. I'm not requesting an exemption, he said. Inspect every requirement. If something fails, tell me what it takes to correct it. He opened the drawer and placed the 3 separate foster folders on the table. But my application is for all 3 dogs, together, and the duration line should read permanent. Daniel wrote on the form, then closed the folders without signing. Final verification after the concrete cures, he said. He carried his flashlight outside to inspect the new fence beneath the first lights of evening. The storm left Blackwater County with downed branches, damaged roofs, and one flooded section of road near Mill Creek. No one who had answered Graham's radio calls needed an ambulance. By sunrise, that was enough. There was no ceremony at the relay station. Tessa Ward brought breakfast wrapped in foil. Luis Ortega drank coffee beside the repaired cabinet while watching voltage hold under load. Ruth Calder counted dogs, bowls, and bags of food. Aaron sat on the back step, completing 12 separate contact reports for 12 adults who had reached shelter. Graham swept mud from the floor. The work felt honest. Nobody called him a hero. Nobody asked him to describe what it had cost to put on the headset. A storm had come. People had done their jobs. The prairie moved into another morning. Daniel Pike arrived at 8 with a level, a measuring tape, and the same unfinished inspection form. He began outside. The fast-setting concrete around each fence post had cured through the night. Daniel leaned his weight against the panels, lifted the gate, and tried both latches. Flint followed him from the other side, tail high, inspecting every pull as though the county had hired him to supervise. He isn't part of the test, Graham said. Daniel checked the bottom clearance. He disagrees. Inside, the new ventilation fan moved enough air to satisfy the county standard. The rear service door opened fully and latched without force. Electrical storage was separated from cleaning supplies. Exposed conduit was covered. 12 sealed gallons of emergency water sat on a new rack beneath the shelter map. Luis supplied the full load report. Daniel read every line. He did not mention the radio warning, Mercy beside Graham's leg, or the volunteers who had worked beneath storm clouds. He signed because the measurements passed. 30-day provisional foster site, he said, handing Graham the form, subject to one follow-up. Graham looked at the word provisional. Daniel opened a second folder. Permanent adoption is Ruth's paperwork, not mine. Your caretaker apartment is a private residence under the lease, and the connected site is compliant for 3 dogs. Ruth had been waiting by the workbench with a pen. The application was 9 pages. Flint's name appeared first, Echo's second, Mercy's third. Graham initialed the veterinary requirements, the housing agreement, the training disclosure, and the acknowledgement that bonded placement was recommended, but not a mystical guarantee that 3 young dogs would always behave like one unit. At the final signature line, he stopped. Last opportunity to preserve your furniture, Ruth said. Mercy was lying on his rain jacket. Echo watched the ventilation fan. Flint had found Daniel's measuring tape and was following it each time the metal blade retracted. Graham signed. Ruth stamped all 3 files with the caretaker apartment address. No one applauded. She simply gathered the papers and said, "They'll need larger crates before spring." Noted, Daniel recovered his measuring tape from Flint. Also noted, Aaron waited until the others went outside. The old field communications unit remained unplugged beneath the workbench. Graham did not play the message again. They had both heard it through to the end, and repeating the words would not answer them. He set the silent unit on the workbench between them. "I left you there alone," he said. Aaron rested both hands on the edge of the bench. "Yes. I told myself you had people around you. I had nurses. I had Mom when she was awake. I didn't have my brother." He nodded. "No defense improved the truth. I don't know how to give those weeks back. You can't." The words hurt, but they were not a door closing. Outside, Flint barked once at Daniel's sedan. Echo answered with a lower sound. Mercy scratched the steel door. Aaron looked toward them. "You can start with this morning." Graham unplugged the radio after the message ended. He did not put it back on the lowest shelf. He set it on the workbench where both of them could reach it. 3 weeks later, the county replaced the old exterior horn assembly. Its steel housing had been weathered too deeply to reuse, but a clean section near the mounting plate remained. Luis cut 3 small rectangles from the discarded metal, rounded the corners, and polished the edges. Graham removed the burned volume knob from the field unit and mounted it on a small plate beside the modern console. Graham stamped one name into each piece: Flint, Echo, Mercy. He fixed the polished steel tags to 3 plain leather collars. They were not medals and did not claim the dogs had performed work they had never been trained to do. They were identification, made from a warning system that had once stood silent. 8 months passed. Winter flattened the prairie into long fields of brown grass beneath a white sky. The relay station looked much the same from the county road, but the differences appeared when a person came closer. A regulation fence enclosed the relief yard. The rear exit wore a new reflective sign. A water tank sat on a heated base. Above the steel entrance, a modest plaque read, Blackwater East Relay and Refuge Point. The building did not become a private rescue center. Once each month, under Ruth's County license, volunteers brought 2 or 3 foster dogs for basic handling sessions. Veterans from nearby towns learned leash skills, crate routines, and the useful humility of being ignored by a distracted adolescent German shepherd. Graham taught no one to turn a pet into a service dog. He taught sit, wait, recall, safe vehicle loading, and how to stop before either handler or animal became overwhelmed. Leah reviewed every training plan. Daniel inspected twice and found only 1 loose bag of food, which Flint had opened without county authorization. At the first session, a quiet former Navy mechanic kept tightening his leash whenever his foster dog looked away. Graham recognized the habit: control the line, prevent the mistake, leave no room for uncertainty. He could have taken the leash and demonstrated the exercise himself. Instead, he asked the man to loosen one hand, step back, and wait for the dog to choose eye contact. It took almost a minute. When the dog finally looked up, the mechanic's shoulders dropped. Graham marked the moment with one word, good, and let it belong to both of them. Teaching, he was learning, did not mean doing everything alone in front of an audience. Flint had grown into a large sable male with a deep bark and the judgment of an enthusiastic committee. He could hold a stay for 30 seconds unless a tumbleweed moved. Echo, sleek and black, still examined every new hum in the station, but now returned to Graham when called. Mercy remained the smallest. She continued moving blankets, jackets, and any unattended cloth into a shared nest. None of them became miraculous. They became known. On the first Monday in January, the county scheduled a full siren acceptance test. Erin arrived early with 2 cups of coffee and a box of replacement batteries. She wore her paramedic jacket, her radio at her collar, and the cautious ease of someone who had visited enough times to know where the mugs belonged. 10 minutes, she said. Graham checked the console. 7. County message says 10. County is allowing for human delay. Flint entered from the relief yard at speed, clipped the rolling chair, and bumped the workbench. 1 coffee cup tipped against the machine's hot plate before Graham caught it. He took a drink without looking. The coffee tasted faintly of smoke. He stared into the cup. Erin checked the machine. Flint sat beside them, with his one imperfect ear angled sideways, offering no explanation. Graham took another drink. Acceptable. Erin laughed. The sound filled the room without demanding anything from him. Luis monitored the exterior horn from a truck half a mile east. Ruth waited by the enclosure with the dogs on leads. Daniel observed the refuge door and emergency lighting. Every roll had a name beside it on the test sheet. Graham fitted his hearing devices and set the gain to the level he had chosen with his audiologist. He placed the headset over them, then checked the cutoff circuit. His pulse rose anyway. Recovery had not erased the old channel. Some sounds still arrived carrying more years than seconds. The difference was not silence. The difference was knowing what to do when they came. Erin stood at his left, close enough to reach the console but not close enough to take it from him. "Ready?" she asked. Graham looked through the window. Flint faced the tower. Echo's ears tracked the low test tone coming from Luis's truck. Mercy stood between them, her cream shoulder touching Flint's side. "Ready?" Dispatch began the countdown. 5, 4, 3. Graham's hand moved to the old burned volume knob, now mounted beside the modern console as a reminder of the system that had failed and the message he had refused to hear. 2. His fingers rested on it. 1. The warning siren rose across Blackwater Prairie. Flint lifted his head. Echo turned toward the tower. Mercy leaned against both of them. The sound traveled over winter fields, reached the ranches east of County 8, and returned as a clean green signal on Graham's screen. He did not turn the volume down. Erin remained beside him. Beyond the glass, Ruth raised one gloved hand. Luis confirmed full coverage over the radio. The three dogs stayed within their leads, alert but steady. Graham stood in the center of every sound he had once tried to escape. Peace, he understood at last, was not an empty room. It was a room where the voices that mattered could reach him, and where he had finally learned to answer. Graham Mercer did not heal because fear disappeared. He healed because, when the channel filled with voices again, he chose to stay and answer. Erin showed another kind of courage. She did not pretend the lost years could be erased, yet she left enough room for her brother to begin again. And Ruth understood that help offered without humiliation can open a door that force would only lock tighter. Flint, Echo, and Mercy never became magical guardians. They remained three young German shepherds with muddy paws, imperfect obedience, and ordinary instincts. But their ordinary presence mattered. Flint brought noise into a life built around avoidance. Echo taught Graham that listening could reveal danger as well as pain. Mercy reminded him that sometimes comfort is simply a warm shoulder that stays close while we find our own way back. The burned volume knob beside the new console became more than a piece of damaged equipment. It marked the difference between shutting out the world and choosing what deserves to be heard. Most of us carry a voice we have avoided, a call we did not return, an apology we postponed, or a truth we were afraid would ask too much of us. Today, choose one small answer, send the message, make the call, sit beside someone whose problem you cannot fix, and let your presence be enough. Perhaps God's grace does not always arrive as a sudden miracle. Sometimes it comes through a sister who calls again, neighbors who return with tools, or three restless dogs who make silence impossible. The gift is not that every wound vanishes. The gift is that we no longer have to face it alone. If Graham's story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need the courage to answer a waiting voice. In the comments, tell us about a person or an animal who helped you reconnect with life. And subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us for more stories of loyalty, healing, and second chances.